Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's that time of day again. Are you ready for another hour of the Kev Baker Show? With me, your host, Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you live from Glasgow, Scotland. And I hope you are ready for one heck of a show tonight. Just the other week over on the Anthony Patch Show, where I co-host, we had the rare privilege and pleasure of being joined by one of the world's leading researchers into the Nephilim, into UFOs, disclosure, ancient technology, all that kind of stuff, L.A.MARZILLI. And Johnny Whistles, who's with me here tonight. Whistles, we've got a follow-up tonight, don't we, brother?
Well, this is going to be fantastic, Kev. Really looking forward to this. And I'd just like to give a big thanks, actually, Kev, to Anthony Patch for getting us a show again with Mr. Marzulli, because this is going to be off the charts, mate.
It really is. And, you know, I think Anthony was dying to be here tonight as well, but he's so in demand, just like Mr. Marzulli, that he's actually been interviewed for another radio show right now. So let's waste no more time, because like I say, tonight we are going on the trail of the Nephilim in Peru with L.A.MARZILLI. And he's an author, a lecturer, and a filmmaker. He's penned 10 books, including the Nephilim trilogy, which has made the CBA bestsellers list. L.A.MARZILLI teamed up with fellow film producer Richard Shaw to create 10 installments of the Watchers series, and that included Watchers 7, UFO Physical Evidence, which actually went on to win a UFO Best Film and People's Choice Awards at the UFO Congress in 2014. So as a follow-up to our show over on Anthony Patch and fresh from Peru, LA, welcome to the Kev Baker Show, sir.
Hey, great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And how was your trip down to Peru then? Because I was watching some of your updates on video, LA. You'd whetted my appetite with our conversation with Anthony Patch, and I just want to get your first-hand experience of what it was like down there.
Well, as always, you know, Peru is a land of mystery. It's extremely enigmatic. And you could even make a statement that much of the country, if not all of the country, is actually an archaeological site. And some of the sites I had been to before, but I've only been to Sacsayhuaman up in Cusco, only one other time, and only one other time with Ollantaytambo. Those are the two major spots on the tour. Because both of these sites have major megalithic stonework in them, which you know, mainstream archaeologists, and we heard this, all the guides will tell us the Inca built all this stuff. It's just a bunch of hooey. And they refuse to prove their point. They just, you know, they basically make the statement, well, the Inca did this. Well, how does the Inca take stones, which weigh up well over 100 tons, quarry them, move them, and cut them with polygonal angles and put them into the wall at Sacsayhuaman? How do they do that? And if I was a billionaire, I mean, you know, there's so many ways. Some of these clowns have so much money and they just spend it on themselves. But I mean, I would do the Sacsayhuaman challenge. I would, you know, pay and pay them well the best stone makers you can find that the Inca have left, or descendants of the Inca, or whatever. Best stone makers in Peru, give them the tools that the Inca had, and tell them, just make me a 4-foot copy of the wall. You know, just make me a copy of the wall. How about a 10-foot section, let's say? Go at it, please.
LA, when I look at Peru, I mean, I'm just an observer. I don't go to these places like yourself. But when I look at Peru in particular, even in comparison to places like Egypt or any other ancient sites around the world, it honestly feels to me as if we are looking at some kind of country that was, for lack of a better term, an alien base in the past.
Well, you know, when you actually go to some place, these places, Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, you know, Cusco, Peru, the Nazca lines, it's incredibly enigmatic, and people have different theories, and there are different theories, and it's really based. It's sort of paradigm based. If you're a biblical literalist like I am, then everything I'm looking at is colored through that lens. of the biblical prophetic narrative. If you're Giorgio Tsoukalos, with all due respect to Giorgio and the guys over at Ancient Aliens, and that's his, worldview, that's his paradigm, and so everything is ancient astronauts. And in some ways, we're both right, because he looks at these sites and I look at these sites, and we know that the Inca didn't do this. And so he goes in one direction, and I go in the other. He states that it's ancient aliens that are building this, ancient astronauts, and I'm saying not so fast, citizen. I get that. First of all, let's define the terms. Anything off-world, not from this planet, is in fact an extraterrestrial. It just so that definition works. It's just a question of whether they come from, let's say, Zeta Reticuli, like Giorgio and the guys would put forth, or as I stand on the shoulders of Jacques Vallée and J. Alec Hynek, are these entities in fact interdimensional beings, which are coming through another dimension to here? And of course, I hold staunchly to the latter, and I've written books on it and lectures on it incessantly. These are messengers of deception. They come from another place. And so, when we look at what they do, when we look at these artifacts which they left, there are no tools that they find on these sites. I mean, yeah, later on they might find like a copper chisel or something, but you would think that there would be hammers and all sorts of, there's nothing around the site. In fact, I was talking to Anson P. Romblo, who excavated looking for the Conchina at Sacsayhuaman, it's a tunnel system which goes from the Coricancha down in Cusco, and about 1.5 miles away comes up in Sacsayhuaman. That's the ancient Inca legend. No one's ever been able to find it. Anselm believes he knows where it is, and he was down there once, and that's a 3-hour conversation. But the bottom line is Anselm had the ability to go in to this one particular area and do an archaeological dig, which lasted 2 years. And I asked him point blank, did you find any tools? One word answer, no. So we've got something which doesn't hold water, because the stones here, for the most part, at Sacsayhuaman are andesite, very, very hard, 7 on the most hardness scale. And yet we see that they're quarried expertly. They're dressed expertly. They're placed without mortar. That's called ashlar construction. They're placed without mortar with polygonal shapes. So they're not even trying to do something which, if you were a builder, a normal builder, you would go, well, let's try to dress the stones like these. They're not doing that. They're all different shapes and sizes. There are curves, polygonal shapes, angles. No two stones even remotely similar. And again, to do that in antiquity is just mind-boggling. So again.
I was just going to say, it almost looks as if they were soft when they were actually put in there, and they hardened in that shape. Some of these stones, it just looks impossible even to cut them. The way that they are. Were they soft at any stage?
Well, that's what's interesting here. This is what people weigh in on. They sort of posit that maybe the stones were somehow softened and they were put into the current shape. And all that, of course, is complete conjecture and speculation. But it's great conjecture and great speculation.
Yeah.
And we don't know how it was done. We really don't. I honestly believe this was built, I call it fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. And I believe fallen angels did this. And this site at Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, in parts of Machu Picchu, I would put forth that they are all pre-flood, that they were destroyed in the great cataclysm of the flood. So that in itself is incredible when we stop and think about that. Fallen angels can levitate things. And what's interesting is we had a report completely unrelated in one way. On the other way, when you've got a worldview and a theory and a worldview and a paradigm which works into that worldview, then all things, lead back to the biblical prophetic narrative. There's a story in our Watchers series, I believe it was Watchers 9, maybe it was 8, But we interviewed Robert Salas, and Robert Salas was the base commander of an intercontinental ballistic missile system, and a UFO appeared over the gate, and everybody freaked out. And the UFO was able to switch off 10 missile silos. Salas heard later on. Now, he had no idea of the work that I'm doing, and he told us this in the interview, which, of course, to me is huge, because it's another link. It's another little clue that we get that points back to the fallen angelic host. And Salas stated that on another base, a missile silo door, which I think weighed, and I'm really bad at numbers, remembering them, it's either 13 tons or 20 tons, or something like that. Let's call it 20 tons, was picked up off all of its, off the missile silo and placed to the ground. And of course, there was no one there doing it. The UFO did it. Now, that's anti-gravity. And the technology that these entities have far surpasses anything we have. I mean, we look like child's play compared to the stuff that they're able to do. And, the biblical prophetic narrative also states things like this. I mean, when angels show up, it's like, all bets are off, anything goes. And so it was interesting how the 20-ton missile silo door was picked up and moved. Now let's go back 12,000 years ago. And they're cutting these stones and moving them miles and miles and miles, 45 miles basically, from Sacsayhuaman from the quarry to Sacsayhuaman. And how is that done? There are no beasts of burden when the Inca were there. They've got llamas, that's it. So what do? Hitch up 10,000 llamas to move this stuff? And it's uphill. It's uphill. So it's when you look at a site like Sacsayhuaman, and of course the guides say it was all built by the Inca, no one has ever shown us how they did it. No one, if it's all built by the Inca, surely someone knows the technology. Surely we would be able to see it duplicated. What we see are two disparate types of stonework. We see the ancient megalithic, which is pristine, which is executed with integrity, great integrity, which shows a high level of sophistication. And then we have right next to it sometimes, what I have affectionately come to call Inca slop. And I mean that with all due respect to the Inca. They were a great people. But when you compare one to the other, one is very, very sloppy, although I would love to have it as a front wall in my house, okay? The other is pristine, so far above what the Inca were able to do. One, the Inca, let's say, uses indigenous stones found a stone's throw, no pun intended, from the site. The other is using andesite, beautiful andesite, very hard, and quarried from 45 miles away. So, I mean, you could take a 13-year-old and go, hey, do you see any difference between the stonework here? And the 13-year-old would be able to tell you exactly what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's exactly, Ken. It's along the same lines of when we look at Egypt as well. The earlier pyramids are the ones that are absolutely spectacular and precise. And then you would expect these civilizations to even improve on that as they progress. But no, they go backwards. So I totally see where you're coming from there. Now, this is what I like about you, sir, because like I say, you go in there into these places, you look for evidence. Now, we don't have any of the tools or the magic that they used, but do we have any form of kind of DNA evidence, anything like that turning up to kind of back up this case you're making?
Well, there's a group of people called the Paracas people. We don't know what they really call themselves, but they show up in Paracas, which is on the coast of Peru. It's about a 3-hour drive south and west of Lima. So it's like right on the coast. And it's a beautiful bay. It's one of the prettiest places in all of Peru. I mean, it's just beautiful. And I've been there numerous times. And Paracas is the home of what we call the elongated skulls, the Paracas people. They're greatly elongated. And they're found in this one particular place in the graveyard, the Chongos Necropolis, which is just outside of Paracas proper, the little town of Paracas. I was just there a few months ago, by the way. And we have done extensive DNA testing. Now, what I mean by that, there are 4 samples that we've tested ourselves. And all that is it'll be in the upcoming, I'm actually taking amitriptyline 1, 2, Nephilim hybrids book, combining them all together. It'll be one huge volume, and it'll sell for like $70 or, $77, something like that. Plus it'll have all the DNA evidence in it. And we're excited about that because the work is ongoing. But the DNA evidence, which we used several different labs to obtain, showed that the mitochondrial DNA, which comes, by the way, from the maternal side of the family, the mother's side of the equation, showed a Middle Eastern/European haplogroup, H2A European, T2B Middle Eastern. That rewrites history. And unfortunately, we had someone who basically gave the information to some geneticist who did a YouTube hit piece on us, telling us how we were doing it all wrong. Mondo Gonzalez, and of course, I go down, I have a team of people that I work with. I've got an archaeologist, another archaeologist is also an anthropologist, that's Rick Woodward. Mondo Gonzalez is our lead archaeologist. He comes down to Peru. Rick stays in the States and handles things from here, and both of these guys are incredible. Both of them have written and appear in the upcoming film, On the Trail of the Nephilim, which will come out probably sometime in the fall. We're still working on it. But Chase Klotsky is our field investigator, and Chase is absolutely amazing. She bags and tags everything with absolute forensic expertise. She's really good. And of course, on these last couple of trips, Richard Shaw, my good friend, was down there and shot everything with his camera. So he was like our videographer and got everything on film. And we haven't done anything with that yet. The bottom line is that the samples that we took from ICA, last October, are now back in the United States. We actually had permission to take them out with all the proper paperwork from the Minister of Culture. So we're working with 3 different labs. We're checking on the extraction. We've started the process, but from what I understand, nuclear DNA is going to be extremely hard to obtain, even from the samples that we've got, which is sort of depressing. On the other hand, we've got good samples, and we'll be able to obtain the mitochondrial DNA. And again, if that points back to a European ancestry, that rewrites history. So this woman, who's a geneticist, wrote this hit piece on us and stated that, oh, it's all contamination. Well, how could she possibly know that? 1, 2, she didn't see any of our protocols that we put in place, that were put in place from the Canadian lab. We had full body suits. We did the whole thing. We did it right. And, just to claim it's contamination when she hasn't looked at any of the data is disingenuous, in my opinion. And the fact that all of the samples pointed to a European haplogroup, again, rewrites history. So with these new batch of samples, we hopefully will be able to make a very definitive case that something doesn't fit the typical paradigm, which is that at the end of the last ice age, the Bering Strait was dry, it was a land bridge, and people from Asia trekked across the Bering land bridge and trickled down into North America, Central and South America, respectively. But I don't believe that. People sail. People move over the country. And Thor Heyerdahl has proven that you can make a papyrus boat, a reed boat, and you can sail that puppy right out of the Nile Delta into the Mediterranean, out the Pillars of Hercules, the Rock of Gibraltar, and you can wind up in Barbados, the New World, with just having a sail. No compass, no nothing. The trade winds will blow you to Barbados. That's the New World. So could it be done? Of course it could be done. America's Stonehenge has writing which is at least 4,000 years old and seems to hail back to Phoenicia. So while our study is inconclusive, it is scientific. We've got people that are working on this. We've got 3 different labs that are working on this. We've got one geneticist in particular who's studying some of the material. we hope that this will become a definitive study. Until we get nuclear DNA, we don't know what it is we're looking at. If a nuclear DNA comes back completely different than anything we've seen, then we're into something. Then we're on to something. But we haven't been able to obtain nuclear DNA. It's not like these shows that you watch on TV where, you know, somebody gets DNA and instantly they tell you what's going on. It's not like that. Ancient.
Another one that popped up the other day was, I don't know if you've seen it or not, that a mummy was supposedly found near the Nazca lines. And the funny thing about it, it's got 3 fingers and 3 toes. And they've got these people examining it. And honestly, it looks rather fake to me. But then again, I never know. I don't know. Did you come across that at all?
I actually did a show today in my TV studio about this, and it wasn't the feature. It was Acceleration Radio. Our signals got crossed, and I wasn't live last night, so I did it in the TV studio today. And one of the things I did address was the so-called alien mummy found out of Nazca. It's my first impression. It's a hoax. That's my first impression. With all due respect to Gaia and my friend Jaime Maussan, I don't think it's real. And, you know, and I talked about this, we were fooled in Watchers 10 with the so-called fairy, and it looked very real. And the x-rays fooled 3 veterinarians. And until we got the thing, even when we had it in our hands, this little fairy about 9 inches tall, the 2 vets who examined the x-rays thought it was real. After an hour and a half of looking at this thing, they don't see it. And then I'm looking at it this thing was on a little plastic tray on an examination table. It had been about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and this whole thing had been submerged in a preservative liquid. And as the air was hitting it, it began to dry up. And I went, what the heck is this? And I took the forceps and reached down, and I picked up something which looked like a piece of wood with some kind of epoxy glue on the end of it. And I held it up to Dr. Berry, who was the veterinarian's face, and said, Dr. Berry, what's this? And he goes, well, that looks like wood and epoxy. We go rushing back to the x-rays, and we begin to look, and we see, wait a minute. It was so clever it was done, it fooled us. And on both shoulders, the arms were elongated. And there were wood and, little like matchstick type, but spindles, round. And then the epoxy to hold it, to elongate the arms and make them look bigger. The skull had been built up. The ears were glued in a different place. I mean, the whole thing. We realized it was a hoax. And at that moment, I called our friends over at Prophecy Watchers, Gary and Bob, and told them, stop the story. It's a hoax. I also called Derek Gilbert at Skywatch and told him the same thing. And then that Wednesday, this was on a Saturday we did this. Wednesday, we were up at the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum, meeting with a zoologist who took this thing apart in front of us. The creature is actually still there now. Jaime Maussan, who owned the creature, was generous enough to donate it to the Santa Barbara History Museum. But it's a hoax. The stinger was more than likely a squirrel claw. The naturalist, the zoologist showed us how the parts were put together. I mean, it was really cleverly done, really wonderfully done. And this is the problem with this. Just because you have a CAT scan of this so-called mummy, which actually it's not a mummy, just because you have a CAT scan of this thing, you need to bring in an anthropologist. You need to bring in medical doctors. You need to bring in all sorts of different disciplines that can look at this thing and ascertain whether it's the real deal or a hoax. My opinion right now, that it's more than likely a very, very clever hoax. If I'm wrong, I will certainly redact that and say hats off to Heine and Gaia TV.
Yeah, the thing about it is it's sad as well, because it's not even to discredit the community, really. this is just making money. That's all that is. It's not to discredit anyone that they're putting out like fake mummies and fake fairies. They are just to make money.
We are on the break. We'll be back after these short messages. L.A. Marzulli.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
And just like that, we were back. This is the Kev Baker Show on truthfrequencyradio.com. If you're listening on the iHeartRadio, TalkStream Live, any of the streams out there, a big, huge, warm welcome. Hope you enjoyed the first half with L.A. Marzulli. Now, he's here with us for the rest of the show. And we're going to shift gears now, because something else that L.A. is famous for covering is how prophetic events are unfolding all around us. He analyses world events, fits them into prophecy. And with everything that's going on right now in Syria, you know, World War III talk for me, LA, it was off the radar. It's been on and off again, but now it is absolutely off the charts. And call it the deep state, call it the cabal. They are really desperately pushing for a war in Syria this time. Now, how does this fit in with prophecy, sir?
Well, we know from the biblical prophetic narrative that nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. I mean, we know that, and that's exactly what we're seeing. You know, we could just take a quick trip around the world, starting with North Korea, who, you know, the North Koreans have concentration camps, as do the Chinese. North Korea's got nukes. The Pakistanis have nukes. You know, the Iranians have a delivery system and nukes. The threat of an EMP is definitely a real threat from any of these so-called rogue countries. What Charles Martel was able to stop at the Battle of Tours and then later on at the gates of Vienna, holding back the Muslim hordes, Merkel and others of her idiot ilk allowed upwards of 1 million refugees to storm into Europe several years ago. Which is just unprecedented. And that changed the cultural fabric, as you know, of that entire place. And then you enter Brexit, which is the people pushing back and saying, we're not doing this. And that's what I love about it. The people finally rise up and say, we're not going to drink the Kool-Aid, just like you did in this country, in the USA. You know, Hillary, are you kidding me? A globalist, more than likely, from what I've heard. You know, she's got all sorts of stuff going on. And she was the favorite. Every single poll in the United States, with the exception of the L.A. Times, had her up 6 points, 9 points, 12 points, 4 points. And one poll had her up at 15 points. And the only poll that had Trump winning was the L.A. Times. Go figure. And even election night, everybody thought it was a shoo-in. And all of a sudden, Florida changed. Florida shifted. And that was the beginning of the Trump rally. And the deep state is against Donald because the Donald is not part of the secret societies. You can go on YouTube and Google Newt Gingrich talks about Trump not being in the secret societies, and watch it out of Newt's own mouth, where Newt goes, you know, the powers that be hate him because he's not part of the club. He's not part of the secret societies. Make no mistake about it. There is a cabal of people that control Washington. That is the deep state. When you call it the shadow government, then they accuse you of wearing a tinfoil hat. But the mainstream media can call it the deep state, and somehow that's okay. The two are one and the same. And that's been in place, which has been unprecedented since World War II. And Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex, which is now has its tentacles in every walk of Americans' lives. The NSA spying on its own citizens, endless war in Vietnam. Meanwhile, 20 soldiers suicide every single day. 20 of our blood and treasure come home and suicide every day. And the media never talks about it. Because if they did, people would push back and go, what are you guys doing here? What's going on here? So everything's a mess. You look at Fukushima, which happened going on 6 years now, off the prefecture of Japan. And reactor 4, and this was written, which is unbelievable. No one knows where the nuclear fuel rods are to reactor 4. They have essentially melted through the containment shell and are, they're going to Kansas basically at this point, and they can't stop it. So now you get Yellowstone, which in this country, which is the super volcano if it blows, lots and lots of eruptions. We've got the Cascadia fault line. Pundits are saying that the big one is overdue in Los Angeles, and I agree. I mean, I've talked about this. This is why you stockpile 4 to 6 months worth of food and water, because when it hits the fan, and it's going to hit the fan at some point, you've got a backup plan. You've got stuff that's growing, or you got a root cellar. You've got things that you can rely on, because you can't rely on the federal government. Just look at Katrina, where a bunch of people were holed up without the basic necessities after that horrible hurricane came through for days. The body count went through the roof. The flooding continued unabated. And, what did the feds do? Look at Sandy, where these guys, the Red Cross, show up with cookies and hot cocoa. That's not going to change the equation. So, you need a real meal. You need blankets. You need a tent. You need all this kind of stuff. And shameless plug, we're gonna get into that on our site and begin to offer some of that to people, because people just need to understand that if you don't prepare, and I'm not talking about Armageddon, or I'm not talking about the 7-year tribulation, because first of all, I'm a dispensationalist, 1. 2, without getting into a whole big argument about it, I'm pre-trib, have been for years. Dabbled in mid-trib, pre-wrath when it came out in the 90s, but quickly jumped back into the pre-trib camp. I don't think we've been appointed to wrath. There are those who adamantly want to go through the tribulation, and all I can tell them is, look, if you want to do it, that's your opinion. My hope is to be out of here, because it's the time of Jacob's trouble, not John's or Frank's. It's the time of Jacob. It has to do with Israel, not the church, and they're two separate identities. But I digress. So you've got all these things happening simultaneously. You've got weird weather going on. You've got the United States government spraying everything with chemtrails. And by the way, you go to Peru, you don't see a chemtrail, not a one. Not one chemtrail will you see in Peru the entire time you're there. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, they spray the crap out of us on a weekly basis. And Ohio, some of the mid states like North Carolina, Kentucky and Tennessee, the spraying is unbelievable. When I was at Knoxville, I just couldn't believe the crisscross in the sky. And it's not a bunch of airplanes leaving fuel like that. This stuff lingers for hours and hours and hours. So you've got Venezuela, which is imploding, and it's gotten so bad. And we have an insider, the guy's a pastor, who's been feeding us information from Venezuela, and it's reached critical mass. You've got another 4 to 6 months, maybe, before complete and utter anarchy envelop that country. And quite frankly, it's almost there. Our media never talks about it. It can't go there. You've got the Mexican cartels, which are running Mexico. And how many people in our country have not had someone in rehab? And yet it's 6 months into Trump's presidency. The wall is not started. MS-13 still continues in the country, and on and on and on. So the dollar is inflated, 20 trillion in debt. How is that going to work? Our country in America is greatly divided along ideological lines. Africa, again, radical Islam in parts of Africa, and you get these massacres which continue unabated, just like you get the wannabe jihadists and ISIS and all this stuff. Then you look at the biblical prophetic narrative, specifically around Damascus in Syria, which has been going on for 5 to 6 years. Another unprecedented event was the fact that the Russians came into the Middle East. That's unprecedented. They've never had that type of power base and port in the Middle East. They have it now, and they're not going to let that go. And we see the cat and mouse game here between the Russians and the United States. Just this week, Russian jets flying, really close to our guys. So, it's a recipe for disaster. And meanwhile, you got the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, all trying to push the global default currency from the U.S. dollar to the Chinese yuan. And remember, Saddam was more than likely whacked because he was trading his oil for euros. Can't do that. Iranians whacked, or are about to be whacked. You can't trade oil for anything but petrodollars. That's it. And that's the currency. That's why we're in bed with the Saudis. But it's a very complex geopolitical arena, and frankly, we see that Damascus, while it is not yet a ruinous heap, the surrounding areas to Damascus are a ruinous heap, and they are dead zones. They are no-go zones. Damascus proper still intact, but the Russians are there, and now you've got ISIS, which was more than likely trained and created by our CIA to topple Bashar al-Assad, and it backfired. So the planet is seething. I mean, it really is. The planet is ripe for something. And of course, then you, on top of that, which we haven't even touched, you get in the whole UFO phenomenon. And Fox News released something about 2 months ago now, stating that UFO sightings are at an all-time high. So that's the supernatural manifesting. And this cat and mouse game.
Having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
Thank you, sorry. Somehow Siri went on by herself. Now, how does that work?
It's never a good sign, Ellie.
Yes, my Siri just went on by herself, and I didn't touch the phone. So you tell me how that happened. I'm dead serious. The phone was leaning up against the computer, and it just went on by itself. Hello.
You are Anthony Patch's friend, so technical glitches, they don't surprise me when people like you come along, Ellie.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time it's happened. They don't like people like me and Anthony and Paul Bagley and Gary Stearman.
So,
and Tom Byrne
Ellie,
and Steve Well.
You brought up UFOs there, and like you say, the world, it's on a precipice right now. And I'm sure every era in history, people have thought it's never been like this before, right? But we can look at North Korea, we can look at the state of Europe, we can look at Syria. Or do you think that the game changer could be a disclosure event?
Well, I've always maintained that. I think that the event that changes everything is disclosure. It's just a question of what triggers it. And there's a saying, and I really hope I'm right with this saying, we go up, they show up. In other words, I go back to 1974, where I heard from my New Age friends, because I was New Age back then, believe it or not, 1974, it's a long time ago, that when the UFO people, when the Space Brothers showed up, they would take the undesirables, the people who were not ready for the cosmic shift, out of here. Now, Blossom Goodshot, I'm sorry, what's her name? She's a channeler up in Washington, Jay-Z Knight. She states just the opposite, that they're implanting and chipping the ones who they will rescue. So you get both sides of the aisle. Go back to 74, the people that were going to get beamed up were the undesirables, the people not ready for the paradigm shift. So that would explain away the rapture of the church. And just so people understand this, you got 1.8 billion Christians on the planet. They're not many. There are not many Christians who even know what the rapture is. There's a lot of people, Christmas, Easter only, CEOs, that show up once or twice a year, but have really no connection to Jesus and the Father and to the Holy Spirit. It's a form of religion, but deny its power. So, and I'm not judging here or saying anything. I'm just saying it. I think the minority there's not a lot of people that are really looking for this. So the saying is, we go up, they show up, which makes sense because something is restraining them. I think we can agree on that. This cat and mouse game has gone on for decades, for crying out loud, and it never stops. I mean, why not just show up and tell us what you guys want? Why not give us the cure to cancer? Why not do something? Oh, no. They just cat and mouse over. So it's almost like they're being restrained, and of course the restrainer would be the Spirit of a living God, the Holy Spirit.
I just wonder if somebody like Putin, a bit of a wild card, he might actually come out amidst all of this drama going on and maybe not alien ships over cities, LA, but at least admit the fact that we're not alone.
Well, that's how they'll couch it. They will say the ancient astronaut people, guys like Stephen Greer, will be jumping up and down, really excited when they show up because they believe that we were created here by E.T. And frankly, the neo-Darwinists believe this also. They will believe that we were created by an advanced race of extraterrestrials. This is what the movie Prometheus puts forth. And Ancient Aliens, with all due respect to the guys, because a great group of guys there, I differ with their opinions, but, they're out, they're on the trail, they're trying to make sense of the thing. And I think it's like 8 or 9 years since that series have gone on, go figure. So they promulgate the ancient astronaut theory that we were visited and possibly created by the so-called extraterrestrial thousands of years ago. So it's there. And the neo-Darwinists say the same thing because they realize it all goes back to DNA. When Watson and Crick, the co-discoverers of the deoxyribonucleic double helix of life, the spiral of life, as I call it, which, by the way, my company's name is Spiral of Life. But it's not, it's the finger of God that's creating all this. And when the Darwinists looked at the complexity of the DNA molecular structure, they realized, wait a minute, this thing just couldn't have sprung into existence. There had to be a designer of some sort somewhere. And that's why and I say this over and over again, when Ben Stein sits down with one of the leading evolutionists of the 20th and 21st centuries, Richard Dawkins, and poses the question to him, where did the first self-replicating molecule come from? He has no idea, nor does anyone else, and that's fair. And then Stein says, well, how do you think it might have begun? And he says, well, millions of years ago in a galaxy, another galaxy, a race of extraterrestrials would have risen to a high advanced rate of civilization by some sort of Darwinian process and created us here, seeded us. That's called panspermia. And so the neo-Darwinists are looking for this. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the advent of panspermia. And what can I say? What can I say? That's what they're looking for. So when these guys show up, they will embrace them as our progenitors. And I've written about this extensively and talk about it, ad nauseum. This is the coming great deception. And when it hits, that's the ultimate game changer. Disclosure, make no mistake about this. Disclosure is the ultimate game changer. And Fox News, UFO sightings are at an all-time high. What are we supposed to do with this stuff? Forget about it? Pretend it doesn't exist? And the church, at least in America, never addresses it for the most part. Now, the churches that invite me, they invite me to speak because their pastor has done his homework and he realizes, wait a minute, something's going on. Is there anybody who's talking about this? And they realize that L.A. Marzulli talks about it and written books about it. And so they invite me and I'll lecture for hours, sometimes 10 hours on a weekend.
And L.A., one other topic I would love to pick your brain over before I let you go tonight is Planet X, Nibiru. I was on your Facebook page today. I see a lot of people posting about that on there. What's your kind of theory on that, your ideas on an extra planet out there somewhere?
Well, the whole deal with Planet X, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And we were all fooled in 2012 when guys like Marshall Masters insisted from his spirit guides, that Planet X was going to be revealed. Well, Planet X never showed up. So then in our Watchers, Days of Chaos, Watchers 9, we interviewed Gil Broussard, and I like Gil, and I like Marshall. They're good guys, I get along with everybody, try to, okay? And Gil Broussard was so sure that in 2015, we were going to see Nibiru, and if not, then in March of 2016, it would show up. Well, now it's, July of 2017, no Nibiru. The people who send me pictures of this they're nothing more than sundogs. That's what they are. They're pointing a camera at the sun. Oh, look, it's Nibiru. No, it's not. It's a lens flare off your camera. It has nothing to do with Nibiru. And then you get all these. So far, I have not seen, and I've seen a lot of different videos that people send me, and I don't watch all of them because it's such nonsense. Could there be something out there? Absolutely, there could be something out there. Have we seen it yet? No.
That's where I am too, Ellie. I call it Nibiru burn. I've had so many of these lens flares and shady kind of videos sent my way that, it's going to be like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. I'm going to actually probably ignore the one that does show something. But I would imagine if there's something like that out there, we will see the signs in the sky a long time ahead of it turning up in people's iPhone pictures, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what people don't get. It's like, people, look, I was taught a lesson with the so-called fairy thing. And we did due diligence. We had X-rays of it. We brought the X-rays of this little creature to a veterinarian, and he looked at the X-rays, and he stated on the record, which is in Watchers 9 or Watchers 10 rather, that it was real, to the best of his knowledge. That's what we went with. But then we did due diligence, and we followed up on it. And in my book, I said, addressing this little fairy creature, I said more testing needs to be done, and there'll be updates. Well, once we discovered it was a hoax, guess what? That's the update. If you go to my Vimeo channel, L.A.MARZILLI, you can watch Anatomy of a Hoax for free, and you can see how we discovered it for yourself. So, look, as a researcher, I learned from that. And am I skeptical? Yeah, I'm skeptical. Am I at the point like some of these yahoos, and I won't mention the guy's name and give him a platform, he's skeptical of anything. I mean, you could have something manifest right in front of his face, and he would tell you, well, it must be the pizza I ate last night. I mean, that's just how he is, and that's fine. The bottom line is, it's good to be skeptical. I've always been skeptical. I've always done due diligence and try to get to the bottom of the heart of the matter, try to find, the truth of the matter, and I've always done that. But sometimes, you go out, and we went out on a limb with the fairy, and, okay, so everybody, except for one person, thanked us for being forthright. And they thought our credibility was more intact because of the way we handled it. We didn't try to hide it. We didn't try to sweep it under the rug. We just came right out and said, hey, we were wrong, and we made a free film about it. So there you go. So, getting back to all this stuff, Nibiru, back burner. Nazca Mummy / alien, back burner. Atacama Mummy, back burner. But in my opinion, it is not an alien. It's something else. It was probably an aborted fetus, in my opinion. And I've spoken to the geneticist who looked at it. Star Child skull, thanks to the work of Chase Klotsky, she cleared up the matter. It has nothing to do with someone from Zeta Reticuli. So we were fed a bill of goods by the people who had it, and were trying to tell us it was an alien skull. I've got a replica of it sitting 3 feet away from me right now that our good friend Joe Taylor at the Mount Blanco Museum molded and cast it for me and sent me one for free, which was really cool.
You should put the tinfoil hat on it, Ellie. It would suit it. But, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and we're actually, you can find Ellie's work at L.A.MARZILLI.net, L.A.MARZILLI.wordpress.com. But I'm really hoping you come over to the UK sometime soon. But I understand you're going to be speaking at a conference in October this year. Whereabouts is that going to be?
Well, the first one is I'll be at Hear the Watchman conference is in Boise, Idaho, and we'll be there for the eclipse, which should be incredible. Full eclipse of the sun, unbelievable. That's Hear the Watchman conference. Tickets are going fast. And, of course, in September, Steve Quayle conference, the Branson conference, and that is well over 20. He's going to have 3,000 people there. There's no doubt. And then, of course, Prophecy Watchers conference is coming up in October. So, I'm slammed really to the end of the year. I'm trying to get a new film out. More about that. Can't talk about it yet, but fairly soon I'll be able to talk about it. And, I'd love to get back on and we can talk later about it.
Oh, I'm shameless. You'll be getting dragged back on here, Ellie. I can't thank you enough for your time tonight, sir. Johnny Whistles, your last words for Ellie.
Yeah, just hearing your schedule there, it really is an honour to have you on tonight. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, guys. God bless you all, and we'll talk again soon.
That's awesome, Ellie. And, just before you go, we've still got a couple of minutes right enough, but what last message would you give to the audience out there? Just throw you totally on the spot, right? What message would you give to people listening tonight?
I would suggest to people that if you think you know who Jesus is, but you don't know him personally, then you don't know him. He's not found in a lot of these sanctimonious cathedrals and churches. It's found inwardly. When a person asks the living God to come in, he will come in. He will dwell in our hearts. And the person, that's called being born from above, being born again. That happened to me 37 years ago. And it's, here I am doing this stuff that I never thought in a million years I'd be doing. There's two prerequisites. The first is recognizing that we are demented human beings, that we are depraved human beings, and that all of us do stuff that we are ashamed of, quite frankly. And that's where the Savior comes in, who is Jesus. And when we come to him and freely admit that we are sinners and need a Redeemer, guess what? It's already been provided, and he is the Redeemer. And when we come to him, he gives us eternal life, and the Spirit of the living God comes into us and begins to teach us in all things. And all of a sudden, that little dusty book that's been sitting on your bookshelf called the Bible becomes alive, the living word, and it is a living word, which is unlike any other book on this planet.
And
so that's the heads up.
Out of all the guests I've had, we cover some of the most out there topics, exorcisms, possession, stuff like that. And it always strikes me that no matter what faith or religion the person follows before the experience, it's always that name, that word, Jesus, that sorts everything out.
It's the name above all other names. And there is no other name by which men can be saved under heaven. If you doubt what I say, I would challenge you to dust off your Bible and go to the Gospel of John and just read that. In the beginning was the Word was with God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him, and nothing that was made was not made without him. I mean, evolutionists, there it is. He spoke everything into existence. He loves you and sees you just where you are, knows more about you than you know about yourself, and he's ready to come into your life. Just ask him.
And there we go, L.A. Marzulli on the Kev Baker Show. Until tomorrow night, wherever you are, make it TFR.
And then he touched that dial.
Thanks, guys. Anselm Belithi knows where it is, and he was down there once, and that's a 3-hour conversation. But the bottom line is Anselm had the ability to go in to this one particular area and do an archaeological dig, which lasted 2 years. And I asked him point blank, did you find any tools? One word answer, no. So we've got something which doesn't hold water, because the stones here, for the most part, at Sacsayhuaman are andesite. Very, very hard. 7 on the most hardness scale. And yet we see that they're quarried expertly. They're dressed expertly. They're placed without mortar. That's called ashlar construction. They're placed without mortar with polygonal shapes. So they're not even trying to do something which, if you were a builder, a normal builder, you would go, well, let's try to dress the stones like these. They're not doing that. They're all different shapes and sizes. There are curves, polygonal shapes, angles. No two stones even remotely similar. And again, to do that in antiquity is just mind-boggling. So there's again.
I was just going to say, it almost looks as if they were soft when they were actually put in there, and they hardened in that shape. Some of these stones, it just looks impossible even to cut them. The way that they are. Were they soft at any stage?
Well, that's what's interesting here. This is what people weigh in on. They sort of polygonal angles and put them into the wall at Sacsayhuaman. How do they do that? And if I was a billionaire, I mean, there's so many ways. Some of these clowns have so much money and they just spend it on themselves. But I mean, I would do the Sacsayhuaman challenge. I would pay and pay them well. The best stone makers you can find that the Inca have left, or descendants of the Inca, or whatever. Best stone makers in Peru, give them the tools that the Inca had and tell them, just make me a 4-foot copy of the wall. Just make me a copy of the wall. How about a 10-foot section, let's say? Go at it, please.
L.A., when I look at Peru, I mean, I'm just an observer. I don't go to these places like yourself. But when I look at Peru in particular, even in comparison to places like Egypt or any other ancient sites around the world, it honestly feels to me as if we are looking at some kind of country that was for lack of a better term, an alien base in the past.
Well, when you actually go to these places like at the top of Machu Picchu, Cusco, Peru, the Nazca lines, it's incredibly enigmatic, and people have different theories, and there are different theories. and it's really based, it's sort of paradigm based. If you're a biblical literalist like I am, then everything I'm looking at is colored through that lens of the biblical prophetic narrative. If you're Giorgio Tsoukalos, with all due respect to Giorgio and the guys over at Ancient Aliens, and that's his, worldview, that's his paradigm. And so everything is ancient astronauts. And in some ways, we're both right, because
Marzulli teamed up with fellow film producer Richard Shaw to create 10 installments of the Watchers series, and that included Watchers 7, UFO Physical Evidence, which actually went on to win a UFO Best Film and People's Choice Awards at the UFO Congress in 2014. So as a follow-up to our show over on Anthony Patch and fresh from Peru, L.A., welcome to the Kev Baker Show, sir.
Hey, great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And how was your trip down to Peru then? Because I was watching some of your updates on video, L.A. You'd whetted my appetite with our conversation with Anthony Patch, and I just want to get your first-hand experience of what it was like down there.
Well, as always, Peru is a land of mystery. It's extremely enigmatic, and you could even make a statement that much of the country, if not all of the country, is actually an archaeological site. And some of the sites I had been to before, but I've only been to Sacsayhuaman up in Cusco, only one other time, and only one other time with Ollantaytambo. Those are the two major spots on the tour, because both of these sites have major megalithic stonework in them, which mainstream archaeologists, and we heard this, all the guides will tell us the Inca built all this stuff. It's just a bunch of hooey. And they refuse to prove their point. They just, they basically make the statement, well, the Inca did this. Well, how does the Inca take stones, which weigh up well over 100 tons, quarry them, move them, and cut them with pulp? He looks at these sites, and I look at these sites, and we know that the Inca didn't do this. And so he goes in one direction, and I go in the other. He states that it's ancient aliens that are building this, ancient astronauts, and I'm saying not so fast, citizen. I get that. First of all, let's define the terms. Anything off-world, not from this planet, is in fact an extraterrestrial. It just so that definition works. It's just a question of whether they come from, let's say, Zeta Reticuli, like Giorgio and the guys would put forth, or as I stand on the shoulders of Jacques Vallée and J. Alec Hynek, are these entities in fact interdimensional beings, which are coming through another dimension to here? And of course, I hold staunchly to the latter, and I've written books on it and lectures on it incessantly. These are messengers of deception. They come from another place. And so, when we look at what they do, when we look at these artifacts which they left, there are no tools that they find on these sites. I mean, yeah, later on they might find like a copper chisel or something, but there's no, you would think that there would be hammers and all sorts of, there's nothing around the site. In fact, I was talking to Anson P. Romblo, who excavated looking for the Conchina at Sacsayhuaman, it's a tunnel system which goes from the Coricancha down in Cusco, and about 1.5 miles away comes up in Sacsayhuaman. That's the ancient Inca legend. No one's ever been able to find it.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's that time of day again. Are you ready for another hour of the Kev Baker Show? With me, your host, Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you live from Glasgow, Scotland, and I hope you are ready for one heck of a show tonight. Just the other week over on the Anthony Patch Show, where I co-host, we had the rare privilege and pleasure of being joined by one of the world's leading researchers into the Nephilim, into UFOs, disclosure, ancient technology, all that kind of stuff, L.A.MARZILLI. And Johnny Whistles, who's with me here tonight. Whistles, we've got a follow-up tonight, don't we, brother?
Well, this is going to be fantastic, Kev. Really looking forward to this. And I'd just like to give a big thanks, actually, Kev, to Anthony Patch for getting us a show again with Mr. Marzulli, because this is going to be off the charts, mate.
It really is. And, I think Anthony was dying to be here tonight as well, but he's so in demand, just like Mr. Marzulli, that he's actually been interviewed for another radio show right now. So let's waste no more time, because like I say, tonight we are going on the trail of the Nephilim in Peru with L.A.MARZILLI. And he's an author, a lecturer, and a filmmaker. He's penned 10 books, including the Nephilim trilogy, which has made the CBA bestsellers list.